I've been thinking about like that with just, the return game, whether it's punt return, kick returns, and Richie James. I mean, he's definitely had some exciting plays in the return game. Return one for a touchdown, the kickoff return. I thought he's had, a couple other, long ones. Punt return, he's had some, really good moments. But then he's also had some low moments and some very average to below average moments as a return man. And I think you would like to get a little bit more out of your returner. And I think that's where maybe Sherfield kind of, helps take up a spot in your opinion. Do you think that, and we'll get into the rest of the receivers, but do you think that this can be between those two guys as far as like one or the other is going to make this roster? So you're saying Sherfield is 100% going to make, or you're saying you would think that he's going to make it. So do you expect Richie James to not make it?
Not necessarily.
Because I think it might be one or the other.
It really could be. If the 49ers see Richie James's primary value as special teams and they don't really value what he brings as a receiver, then hell yeah, it might come down to him or the other.
Well, that's what we've seen, right? Like, like it seems like Richie James, and I think he's very talented, and we'll get to him. But he seems like a guy who has kind of been forgotten as a guy that can be utilized as a pure receiver and do receiver things, that, as we like to say.
He's made plays.
He's always out, like he's always active. He's always in, as a kick return, punt return. But we saw late last year they started replacing him and having guys like what's his name? Craycraft in returning punts, like replacing Richie James.
That's what I mean, is like it seemed like Richie James was phasing himself out of his value. They started wanting he didn't seem like he was doing well on special teams. He didn't have that return, but then later on in the season, it started to get like to a point, in special teams, in punt returning, kick returning, it's kind of a thankless job. Like it doesn't, if you return a kick, it doesn't really work almost ever. And every time they get tackled, you're like, well, why didn't he just take a knee? He didn't even make it to the 25, and then, punt returns, normally you don't get much out of it. And so, Richie James started to get talked about because of the plays he wasn't making. He wasn't fielding punts that you thought he should field. He was taking kicks out that you thought he shouldn't have. Like he was doing the opposite of what everybody was like expecting him to do, or what it seemed like he should do in that situation. And that's why they started trying out other guys in place of him. And if you start to, for a guy like Richie James, who it seems like they're in no hurry to get him out in the field. Even as a receiver, River Craycraft was starting to get snaps later in the season that he wasn't getting. So if the 49ers aren't in a hurry to get you out on the field and you're starting to lose your value as a special teams player, then you're in a rough spot. Yeah. Especially if your special teams was your main point of contribution. And now they feel like they need to put somebody else out there. That's tough. That's tough. And yeah, we can talk about his game against Green Bay, right? When all the receivers had COVID and he got his big game. But we talked about this. I think it was off the air. That was like the easiest and simplest big game I've ever seen. And I'm not a Richie James hater in any way, but you watched that, whatever it was, 160 something yards and one or two touchdowns.
180, I believe, in a touchdown.
I mean, but you watch it and you're like, all right. Like
it didn't. I get what you're saying. Like I
don't want to sound like a hater, but
you probably do sound like a hater. But
I do 100%.
It's I get what you're saying in the sense of it didn't look like like damn, we just can't stop this guy.
No,
like you never got that. You never got those thoughts while watching it.
No, and yeah,
I do struggle with the fact that. With Richie James, I think that he is so talented, and it's crazy to me because I feel like he can win at every level of the field. He can win vertically. We've seen it multiple times.
We've seen him do some crazy shit in practice in person too.
Right. He's been someone who can be a guy that is, productive, just getting the ball in his hands, right? Whether it's screens or little throwbacks. We saw the play against Arizona a couple years ago that he raced down the field 50 yards when 49ers couldn't really get anything going offensively.
That basically jump-started the game.
Right. He has been someone who, when targeted, he's pretty productive. I think his in the 2019 season, he averaged like 21 yards per catch. Last year, late in the year against Arizona, he caught a deep ball from CJ Beathard. And it was like, he does these things and he's productive. And obviously the Green Bay game where he was extremely productive. And it's like, but for whatever reason, and I don't know if it's maybe something upstairs, but I feel like they look for every opportunity to not get him on the field. And that's the part I don't understand that. Now, he spoke about it after his game against Green Bay, basically kind of saying like, it's the politics of the sports. And I understand the politics of the sports. Yep. But the one thing that's kind of contradicts that is that Kendrick Bourne is an undrafted free agent. And he's playing over you, and you were the draft pick. And that's the only thing that kind of stopped. Because I understand, like, Ayuk, Samuel, like those guys were high draft picks. Like they're gonna play over you regardless. Like, unless they just show that they suck, and clearly they don't. But Kendrick Bourne, he was undrafted, and he's carved out his role and has it where he works into the offense. And the crazy thing about Richie James, if you really just kind of watch the games, and maybe if you even look at his snap count after games, he's on the field. He's just like blocking and then doesn't get the ball. It's so weird. It's really one of the oddest things because I think he's somebody that, again, I talked about how he can win at every level, but he also can be extremely productive in the slot. Like he can play slot. I remember his rookie year preseason game against Dallas Cowboys. He out the gate got a couple catches in that game. I think in that preseason he had like 14 catches over 100 yards. So when given the opportunity, he has been productive. I wonder why his opportunities have maybe been limited. And do you think, and I know, we start talking about him and Sherfield, but maybe this is the year where it's like, all right, there is no Kendrick Bourne. All right. He was kind of Richie James boogeyman, right? Kendrick Bourne's out of here. So now we didn't draft any receivers, Richie. All right. We didn't draft any receivers. We haven't brought in any big name free agents or anything like that. Here is the best opportunity to make an impact on this roster that you'll ever get. Do you think he takes advantage of it?
Like, I'll be positive and say, yeah, like if he truly feels like his lack of an impact was due to roster politics, we'll just say primarily, like it didn't have. And again, I get the idea that there was other stuff. There's other stuff that the 49ers didn't like, but it does kind of lead me to believe that the 49ers are ready to him. And in them, the 49ers might be thinking the same exact thing. Like, look, we didn't feel like we needed a receiver. We felt like we could have some of these guys compete to win a role. So let's just let them compete and see who wins. And that's kind of goes back to, remember when everybody was, I think it was 2 years ago, when everybody thought the 49ers were going to draft corners and they didn't draft any. And everybody was like, what the hell?
Everybody
but Eric Crocker. But and you and me were both on the same page. We're like, they can't just draft a corner when they really don't even, like, that position has not settled itself yet. They want to see these guys compete. They don't know for sure what they have in them yet. And they don't just want to squash it by drafting a corner super high and then you get nothing out of it. Like, you really won't ever know what you had in those guys because you're never going to give them an opportunity to compete. And that may not necessarily be a carbon copy of the situation that Richie James is in, but he's kind of in the same situation now. Like, you have a bunch of guys on the roster, none of which like inspire any confidence. Even the former 3rd round pick in Jalen Hurd, who could be just this massive X factor. Like, Jalen Hurd could be a roster cut, or he could like compete for the most snaps among the wide receivers. Like, literally could be anywhere. So if Richie James was ever going to earn himself a bona fide opportunity to be, anytime they run 3 wide receiver sets, to be the guy that steps on the field, or anytime somebody gets hurt, he's the next guy, it would be now. But that doesn't mean that he's going to take, you asked me if he was going to take advantage of it. I said yes. So I'm going to say yes. I'll stick with yes.
But I feel like your heart is telling you no, or your mind is telling you no.
No,
I feel like
you're
saying that just because you don't want to come off as harsh, but really you're thinking.
Well, I just downplayed his 180 something yard game as it was super. Like I said, it was super unimpressive. So I can't I don't want to just squash everything that Richie James is and ever could be, but it doesn't feel like the team needs him. Like that's really what it comes down to. Like there were times last year, I mean, Deebo Samuel missed how much of the season? Half at least, like and Brandon Ayuk missed a few games. And really, I mean, Richie James did come in and he had a big game, but then it seemed like the 49ers couldn't wait to get him back out off the field. Not in a mean way, but like it was clear that they would rather have Ayuk and Deebo Samuel on the field despite a 180-something yard game. So to me, they didn't see – it wasn't like, holy shit, where's Richie James been hiding this whole time? It was like – they just, the 49ers did not seem impressed.